Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is ironic how life is, because for the in this parliament and in the previous parliament, in the long wee hours of the morning, I have seen a red-headed witch flying through the chambers. Mr. Speaker, I would like to start by giving a warm welcome to Letitia from the Black Panther movies, and I say to her, welcome, welcome to beautiful Guyana. Mr. Speaker, once again, I am here to address this honorable House on another budget. This time, our 2023 national budget, improving lives, building prosperity for tomorrow. And Mr. Speaker, I am fortunate to have heard this morning at 5 to 9, the Honorable Bobby on his 104 program, who reminded us, ignore loud and aggressive persons, for they are a vexation to the spirit. And therefore, the honorable member that has an inferiority complex when it comes to me, I feel sorry for you. I know the challenges of size, and I expect you to behave the way you do. I want to ask the Honorable President to make sure that the Most Honorable Kwame McCoy is part of that mission of men that we support. Mr. Speaker, let me start by recognizing that the preparation of any national budget, especially one of this size, is no easy task. I recognize the long hours of work undertaken by the staff of the Ministry of Finance and you, Honorable Minister Ashley Singh. And most importantly, the families of staff members who have endured many hours of their loved ones working overtime to fashion this budget. To all of them, I say thank you. As I stand here to address this august House in my British accent, thank God I am proud of the strong Guyanese education that taught me to speak properly, all right here in Guyana. I would like to think that my immediate response to that comment about a British accent would be to just laugh in the face of such pettiness at this critical juncture in our history. But I can't because it hurts me to think that in this day and age, we are still quibbling over a distraction so as not to address the real issues. One might also assume that I do not appreciate the efforts that have been made to put together this budget, that maybe for the first time in our history has behind it the resources to provide for our people in ways that we could never have thought of before. I do appreciate the effort, though woeful it is, but my overriding response is a deep disappointment that this opportunity to really give our country and our people what they've waited so long for is an opportunity lost. I cannot but weep for my people, the people of Guyana, who had hoped that they would see more in this budget, a true understanding of any government, the need to put their people first, to see that the benefits gained from the oil boom could create real-time transformation in people's lives. I had earnestly hoped that this budget would showcase a change of thinking on the part of the PPPC, that they would see what could be done with the resources we now have available, and that they would have the moral inclination to do so. Alas, all to no avail. In addition to the lack of understanding of the needs of the Guyanese population that has been highlighted in this budget presentation, is the willingness to defend its inaccuracies with a state of inaccuracies and, in some cases, outright lies that are mind-boggling, to say the least. Our aim as elective representatives of our people is to ensure that we provide the means for every last one of them to live full lives, to have access to quality health care, education, the means to earn a living, provide for them a dignified old age, and to use the country's resources towards that purpose. So, on behalf of my people, the people of Guyana, the questions I must ask are these. How does this budget contribute to better lives for our people? How does it improve education and healthcare? How does it allow our people to have the resources to live comfortably? How does it add dignity to the lives of the elderly? Mr. Speaker, this budget has the responsibility to articulate a vision for Guyana, and this is what we're not seeing. What will the country look like in 5 years, in 10 years? Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, a real vision cannot be found amongst the collection of large infrastructure projects thrown together. Mr. Speaker, there are few truths that I hope we all can agree on in this room, regardless of the hostilities, the vitriol, the lack of respect, and downright verbal abuse hurled especially to us women in this honorable house. The first truth is that regardless of which side of the house we sit, any government in office in Guyana from now on will be able to have money to spend on the medium and long term. The gods have given us that gift, and we are thankful. The question is, how do we prioritize the welfare of all our citizens, our children, our pensioners, those with special needs? And how does this budget treat these groups? This must be our number one consideration. Mr. Speaker, this budget is set at 781.9 billion. The first budget to benefit from 31.3 billion from the sale of credit carbons, along the transfer of 2.8.9 billion from the National Resource Fund. Real GDP grew by 25.1%. The US dollar has been relatively stable over the last 2 years and even before. All good, Mr. Speaker. All good, Mr. Junior Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, as I am fair in my assessment of the positive nature of these indicators, I want to give credit where it's due. A failing highlighted during these budgets. Mr. Speaker, no matter how you cut it, our nation would be sitting in a totally different place had the APNU AFC coalition not pushed the development of our oil and gas industry, as any good government was expected to. What is sad, Mr. Speaker, is the minister's constant tirade that he collected a damaged economy. Mr. Speaker, at this point in time, I want to remind us all how this economy was ticking as far back as 2018. The rep
Honorable member, just give me 1 minute. Member, Mr. McCoy, Honorable Minister, you're in my right ear. I can't help but hear you. So if you could tone down what you want to say and be a bit more effective in it. I'm just getting now overly annoyed with the shouting from you. You get back your time, Honorable Member. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Yes, I wanted to remind the junior minister of how strong our economy was in 2015. And these are the words of the International Monetary Fund. And of course, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to be sharing all these documents with the Parliament. And this is what it says. Ghana's economic growth strengthened in 2018 with broad-based expansion across all major sectors. Real GDP growth grew by 4.1%. And then it goes on to say, production, which was largely financed by direct foreign investments, petroleum sector, public finance, improved in 28 as the central government deficit came in at 3.5% of GDP, lower than the budgeted 5.4, and it goes on. Economic growth increased. The medium-term prospects are very favorable as oil production is on schedule to begin in early 2020. We started in 2019. And there's the director saying that the management of Ghana's oil wealth and the emphasis they need to complement it. They are commended that the National Resource Fund framework aims to save some of the resources. Mr. Speaker, I don't want to spend more time, but to say there was no bankrupt economy in 2018. So, Mr. Speaker, and this is where I want to say that, since assuming office, I want to quote page 1 by the Honorable Minister, who I see had to get up and leave, and that's okay. I know how that feels. Since assuming office, our government set about the task of repairing the deep and lasting damage caused by 5 years of misrule and mismanagement. Now, what's good is that he introduced to this parliament the term intellectual dishonesty. And it's interesting that the minister himself is a victim of his own intellectual dishonesty. So, Mr. Speaker, the shouts that nothing was done have been resounding. But as I said, the facts are here on the emergence of Guyana's oil and gas industry, which the APNO AFC so carefully chartered so that all Guyanese could reap the benefits. And in terms, we know that the road to first oil 2015 to 2019, I want to mention some of the things that we achieved in those 4 short years with less money to spend and restrictions on spending money. We strengthened the GGMC, GRA, EPA, signed a new agreement, a production license, established the EITI, established a Department of Energy, and even created the very first GIPEX oil conference. A big oil conference. We keep hearing that it's the first time. We did it in 2018. 650 persons paid to come. And that was when we were in government. We signed bilateral partnerships, MOUs for training, and got support from the World Bank, IDB, IMF, the Chatham House, the Royal Institute, the Oxford University. It goes on. Tons of work was done, Mr. Speaker, by hard-working, committed Guyanese. It's time we give credit where it's due. Mr. Speaker, I note that in 2016, our inflation rate was 1.4, 2017, 1.5, 2018, 1.6, 2019, 0.1, by the same government that supposedly mismanaged the economy. Today, it's a whopping 7.2% and rising as the food cost highlights. Prudent management of the inflation rate, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if we look at Appendix 6 in the budget, of course, it talks about our public debt. And I don't want to list all the figures because of time, but I just want to say in 2018, it was 1.79 billion, and by this year, we expect it to be 4.4 billion. Mr. Speaker, the minister states on page 26, since returning to office, we invested over 10 billion in plant and equipment. This year, sugar gets over 4 billion. And yet, Mr. Speaker, when the coalition was in power and so-called mismanaged the industry, in 2019, 92,282 tons of sugar was produced. And in 2022, under the excellent management of Mr. Singh, the PPPC could barely produce 47,000 tons. This does not make a lot of business sense, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I don't have to repeat the pain our citizens are experiencing with the high cost of living. We've heard the present cost of items in the basic basket of goods. And I'm asking, is this really the best we could do. This fastest growing economy in the world, one of them. The best we could do, Mr. Speaker, is to give the pensioners $5,000 increase. Mr. Speaker, allow me, allow me to directly show good quality depends. A bill for $4,000. And I know depends can be bought cheaper in Guyana. But it was a pensioner that said to me, Miss Cathy, we buy this one because it lasts a little longer. So your $5,000 increase would be spent on 18 depends. And maybe we could throw in a bottle of Ensure for the pensioners. Is that the best we can do? Mr. Singh, Honorable Minister Ashley Singh, you and this PPP government have given the pensioners nothing really. And that's why we had recommended 50%, 50,000. Our persons with special needs, whom the Minister of Education boasts we're going to do more for, which is good. They get an increase of $2,000. Really, Mr. Speaker? That is actually 2 taxi drops, assuming you're living in Georgetown. If you're living anywhere near Herstelling, it would be 2,000 or 2,500, depending on the time of day. Mr. Speaker, there has been much debate about the future of education, and I am strong and I support the programs that are going to improve the ability to give a higher quality education to our students. But Mr. Speaker, we have been told, but we have to ask, how come with a budget of over 700 billion, we have to wait until 2025 for the students, the university students, to get a little something? Mr. Speaker, could we give them a 50% reduction in the fees? Get creative, work together, maybe arrange a 25% rebate, something to help the students in these difficult times. How can we justify putting $4 billion into sports? And I'm a strong supporter of sports. How can we support and justify $4 billion in sports and a little over $3 billion for the University of Guyana, the premier institution where we and the private sector expect our qualified Guyanese students to come out of from, especially given the local content requirements? 5 of the 8 faculties at UG are science-based. Within the Faculty of Social Sciences, there are 12 different disciplines. How do you justify gold scholarship programs, getting about half of UG's budget with no physical infrastructure of that size to work with? Mr. Speaker, politics should never intrude on our educational capabilities. The Learning Channel, quite possibly, is the most important mass education tool for the primary and secondary education process, education in Guyana, and it must be commended. But this entity has been unable to reach its full potential because it continues to be constrained by nepotism and limited thinking. Why should someone who is related to the sitting Minister of Education be running that facility with no broadcast experience and no education background? These are the issues that continue to plague us, and these are the issues that have to be addressed. Mr. Speaker, we could have used the opportunity of these debates to discuss these issues. Mr. Speaker, how is it possible that the APNU AFC coalition, at a time when there were no oil reserves, was able to make permanent salary increases in wages and salaries for teachers, nurses, doctors, the defense services, police, and security forces? It moved from 39,570 in 2015, and again, I don't want to spend time on that, but it moved from just over 39,000 to 70,000 by 2019, a 77% increase. Mr. Speaker, I want Guyanese to understand what I'm saying. I'm making a distinction between putting and increasing your minimum salary as opposed to one-off cash grants. I want Guyanese to understand that if you were receiving a minimum wage of 39,570 in 2015, and you then started to get by 2019 70,000, it means you were getting an extra 30,430 every month before tax. Imagine by the end of the year, you would have received approximately, roughly, don't knock me down fit, $365,000 extra. Now do you understand, Guyanese, how small that 35,000 one-off cash grant really is? We recommended taking the minimum wage to 100,000. Don't the poorest Guyanese have rent or a mortgage, family, electricity, and all those costs to pay? Mr. Speaker, what is of great concern, which is reflected in this budget, is the government's propensity to provide cash grants instead of increasing wages and salary. And what exactly is a cash grant? I want everybody to understand we're in support of cash grants, but it must be a top up. Because guess what? You can't take a cash grant to a bank. You can't use a cash grant that is unpredictable and subjected to the whims and the fancies of this government to give it to you. You can do very little long term with it. So these are the fundamental problems. Mr. Speaker, on the tourism development front, I want to say that what is important, what we have to look at long term with regards to our long term plans for economic development is that information must be driven by data, right? All of us in this house, including the private sector, must be given the opportunity to interrogate that data. Mr. Speaker, I asked the question to the Honorable Minister of Tourism. What is the data that we can use that supports the decision to place a much anticipated hospitality training school 6 hours away from the geographical area of our new hotels? All the new hotels are going to be on the coast. And yet, we're asking that investor to work out residential accommodation for his staff to be able to go to the hospitality school, which we know is an important institution. I worked and did studies on that also. So why would you give a potential investor that burden when we know they want to ensure that their staff can go on with on-the-job training? And that's why I say to this honorable house, why not an urban area, is a totally unacceptable answer. Bring the data, Mrs. Minister. It's the same kind of thinking and lack of data that allowed us to create a synthetic track in a location where our data does not show the majority of our athletes do not come from, and the athletes that can use it have to take 2 buses each way. Mr. Speaker, I want to note that when it comes to some sectors, reductions have been huge. Gold is a classic example, where the earnings were 876.6 million by 2022, but had fallen to 80.30 million. Mr. Speaker, sadly, one of the problems we've had in this debate, these debates, has been the gross inaccuracy deliberately voiced and spurted out here. And one of those is that of the Guyana Forestry Commission. We heard the Junior Minister of Finance, the Minister of Agriculture, and others speak of the APNU AFC bankrupting the Forestry Commission. Mr. Speaker, again, nothing could be further from the truth. The report of the forensic audit and review of the Guyana Forestry Commission, dated December 31st, 2015, by Anand Gulsaran on page 8, informs us of a totally different position. And I quote, during the period 2006 to 2010, the Commission made payments to other state agencies totaling 1.28 billion out of its retained earnings. Of this amount, two payments totaling 600 million were made to NISL to meet the cost of the 2007 World Cup, to assist in the construction of the Marriott, and another 600 million transferred to the governor of the Bank of Guyana as the liquidator for the Colonial Life Insurance CLICO. So you see where that money went prior to 2015. And at section 22(1) of the Act, we're reminded the Act prohibits the Commission from making a loan or any grant except for the purposes of carrying on the functions of the Commission. Despite that, a grant of US 600,000 was made to the Irakrama International Center. Now, I'm a strong supporter of the Irakrama. I have visited several times, encourage my family when they come to go and visit. However, let's not talk about violating the law when you are doing it yourself. 1.36, the Commission's main operating bank account, was overdrawn by 90.2 million by the 31st of May 2015. And the interest was 489,204,000. That's what we're talking about. Mr. Speaker, I want to go also to this report that was tabled in this house, signed away, I think it's called. What a collection of, I won't say what it is. But I am going to ask the Parliament to share this information. The Honorable Minister on this side, Minister Rodriguez, came here and pontificated about the Global Witness Report. She stressed the C word. You know the C word, right? We can't say it, but you know. That's it, right. She stressed the C word. But what she did not do is state that Global Witness themselves withdrew their report and that Forbes magazine did a story on the withdrawal of that report. So the information is here, and we may have forgotten our own Guyana Oil Now. Global Witness withdraws report on Guyana. It's right here. And then from Global Witness it said, statement on the withdrawal of the Global Witness report on Guyana's oil sector. Our February 2020 report on Guyana's oil sector, signed away, is not consistent with that focus. And for this reason, we've decided to remove it from our website and stop using it in our campaigning work. We regret any unintended negative consequences arising from this report. And then the assessment that Forbes magazine, the very reputable Forbes magazine, made on this, and let me quote, this is Forbes magazine. Yet on closer examination of the report, right, Forbes magazine, the allegations do not really stand up. Global Witness states repeatedly and unequivocally that it found no evidence of wrongdoing by ExxonMobil or any of the government ministers. Imagine that. And this is what Forbes magazine says. In the end, just a few hours of analysis reveals the Global Witness report for what it is: an ideologically motivated attack piece aimed at some of the biggest players in the oil and gas industry, and I will add the former government, right? Which, given the group's history, comes at no surprise at all. Mr. Speaker, We all know that Mercury was contracted and Global Witness was just one of the many deliverables. And our vice president said publicly it was money well spent. Mr. Speaker, I would like to now look quickly at the area for which I was responsible as former Minister of Public Telecommunications. And I want to look at this because I listened in horror as the Minister of Amerindian Affairs came to this House, stood at this podium, and uttered a battery of untruths. Mr. Speaker, it was disingenuous at least and downright dishonest at worst to suggest that nothing was done in this sector under the last administration.
Honorable member, the dishonest to be withdrawn, but before I ask that you get an additional 5 minutes, you
you.
had, you had,
Comments? My
I
apologies.
said before,
Comments?
you had made a statement that the Honorable Minister Manning Chan had hired her relative at the Learning Channel. I would also need you to produce that evidence. Honorable Member, Mr. Jones.
Thank you. Comrade Chairman, I move that the honourable member be given 5 minutes to conclude our presentation.
Thank you, Honorable Chief Whip. Honorable Member, clock starts at 12:25.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I will withdraw that word and just say that the former minister was mendacious in her utterings when she stood at this program. Mr. Speaker, she spoke about finding a variety of tablets and batteries. Remember that? At a location in Diamond. And this is where I would like to submit also the audit of the one laptop per family project. And Mr. Speaker, item 7. Our procedures revealed that the management was unable to account for an additional 1,875 laptops costing $109 million plus, right? Laptops acquired by purchase or grant were a total of 55,145. Some 5,136 were either stolen or defective. The total cost was 1.6 million. And Mr. Speaker, lots of those were left in a location. And I have a feeling that that's the same location she's referring to. Mr. Speaker, I don't have to talk about training over 4,000 students, about creating over 170 ICT hubs, connecting ministries, setting up satellite VSAT dishes. I want to comment very quickly on a comment that the Minister of Finance made when he talked about the hinterland poor and remote ICT project languishing. That's the word, languishing. And believe it or not, that project we signed the MOU and also their photographs online of the former Minister of Finance signing with Mikiko Tanaka, the former UN representative. We worked with Khadija Musa since 2016 when the ministry was created. So don't come and say nothing was done. Mr. Speaker, at the end of the day, what I want to say is that my presentation is not an indictment on what was done, but it really is a hope that we can search for common ground. Let us all understand how we're failing our people. Because, Mr. Speaker, an eye for an eye will just make us all blind. I could mention, of course, the fiber optic cable. And I just want to remind people of the figures. 13 billion wasted. not a sense of this cable anywhere between Linden to Latham, managed by the son of a former president. Mr. Speaker, I will lay over that report too. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, we have allowed race and politics to divide our country to our own detriment. And if we don't see that the world is watching on and laughing as our resources are depleted for the benefits of others, then these days of debates would be an exercise in futility, another wasted opportunity. Surely, Mr. Speaker, our ability to understand history, the challenges that hate and conflict bring to our country, should encourage us to be able to meet in a different way, encourage dialogue, and to come to some common ground. Mr. Speaker, we've all made mistakes in the past, and we understand the challenges any government may face in the search for lasting solutions. I am not here to put down the efforts to craft this budget. Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, one of the rallying cries in this House has been the chance of rigged elections. And we maybe don't realize that that perpetuates a stereotype that one ethnicity is responsible for the damage that was done to our electoral process, when we all know that it was an incompetent GCOM that failed to deliver on a good election, and up to today is not willing to examine its administrative processes. Mr. Speaker, these are the things that we must be honest enough and bold enough to have a conversation on. Mr. Speaker, I want to close with a quote from the Most Honorable Lee Kuan Yew. A nation is great, not by size alone. It is the will, the cohesion, the stamina, the discipline of its people, and the quality of its leaders which will ensure it an honorable place in history. Mr. Speaker, we on this side look forward to creating and contributing.
Honorable member, I see the honorable member Ms. Valda Lawrence on the floor.
Mr. Speaker, thank you, and sorry to interrupt the member. But I hear the honorable member and minister, what's his name?
Yes,
Forte,
the
Mr.
point of order.
McCoy, shouting out Mrs.
I
Myers'
don't,
name in this
I,
parliament,
honorable
Mr.
member, I
Speaker.
don't see
And
that
this
as a
is
point of
happening
order,
over and over
but I have
again
already,
with people who are not
I
here.
have already named the minister already. Honorable member Ms. Hughes.
Sorry, can I just read the quote again? Huh? Yeah? Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as I was closing, I'm urging that we can work together, and I wanted to end with this quote from Lee Kuan Yew. A nation is great not by its size alone. It is the will, the cohesion, the stamina, the discipline of its people, and the quality of its leaders, which ensure it an honorable place in history. Mr. Speaker, we on this side of the fence, this side of this most honorable House, are committed to helping to ensure that Guyana becomes the next Singapore in the Caribbean, for the benefit, though, of all her citizens. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Guyana.